What if the next medical breakthrough could change thousands of lives? Welcome to Moving Medicine Forward, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on groundbreaking healthcare innovations. I'm your host, Jeremy Schrand, and together with CTI's leading experts, we explore the cutting edge of clinical research transforming patient care. Each episode, we dive deep into the stories behind medical advancements, featuring insights from global therapeutic experts who are literally changing how we understand and treat critical disease. From rare genetic conditions to revolutionary treatment protocols, we're not just discussing research, we're highlighting the human stories driving medical progress.
In this episode, Joel White, founder of Market Cap Consulting, is back. And this time we explore what makes a great CRO, how organizations balance speed and quality in fast-paced trials, and the future of innovation in drug development. Whether you're a sponsor, a CRO professional, or just curious about clinical trial ecosystem, you won't want to miss Joel's candid insight and practical advice.
Welcome to the podcast, Joel. To start things off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah. So Joel White, you'll see my name associated with Market Cap Consulting. That is not some big consulting firm. That's just me. One person now, probably forever. And so, I focus within the CRO industry on pretty much all things pricing and finance. And then how you and I got acquainted was through, I do some industry analysis on LinkedIn and such. And I've been doing that, forever for myself. And I just love pretty much anything and everything about the industry. And I'm a CRO guy straight and through. I joined in 2006 and I was in-house at 4 different CROs, only one of which still exists. And went out on my own in 2021 after the last one that I worked at, Cineract, was acquired by Syneos. And so I've been out on my own for a little bit over 4 years now.
So let's go back and let's talk about a little bit of that content that you're putting out on LinkedIn. So every quarter you put out a quarterly recap. How did this start and what does it cover?
Yeah. Started over 20 years ago. My first job out of college. I've always been fascinated by publicly traded companies, and the visibility that you get into these companies by virtue of the fact that they have to report out what's going on in their business every 3 months. That's just not something that you can get from most privately held companies. And so I found coming out of college, it was a great way to learn about what was going on in an industry I joined, which at that time was a large retailer. And so I would listen, back then, early 2000s, these weren't on the web with nice slide decks and presentations, let alone with transcripts that you could read afterwards. You just had to listen to them live. And so I used to sit in my cubicle at Limited Brands back in the day and take notes on what other retailers, same store sales were and things like that. And then when I joined the CRO industry in 2006 at PRA, which at that time had just gone from publicly traded to privately held, I didn't know anything about clinical research. There's not really a medical or scientific bone in my body. So I thought, what better way than to learn, from the publicly traded companies around me. And I'm embarrassed to say, I don't remember all of the ones that were publicly held at the time, but I believe Quintiles was and several others. And so I would just listen to their calls. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I tried to learn as much as I could from the job I had at the time, but I thought it was useful to learn from these other companies as well. And so what I would do, I would just take these notes to myself in a notebook. And then, 4 years ago when I was going out on my own, a friend of mine who I've known forever, he now runs a small IRB. He said, you should put these out on LinkedIn. And I said, no, I definitely should not do that because nobody wants to read about CROs on social media. And he said something to the effect of that if it's interesting to you, it's probably going to be interesting to other people. And so I started doing that. Around that time, Science 37 was going public. There was a lot of information about that was wrong. And so I put out a piece about that. And then I started taking the notes that I was writing for myself every quarter and just putting them out for broad distribution. And it has really helped me organize my own thoughts around the industry because I will do it until I stop learning from doing it. And that's the number one reason I do it, is to help myself learn. And then, selfishly, it helps with the work I do as well to understand what's going on in the industry. So I love it. The response is great. And like I said, I'll just keep doing it until I don't enjoy it anymore. But the last one I did, that's the most fun I've ever had doing one. So it just never gets old.
Our first conversation we had together, you just told me how much of a fan you were of CROs. Yeah. So how would you just define a clinical research organization, and what role does it play in the broader clinical trial ecosystem?
Yeah. So clinical research organization, I think it's important to know that it's also even more technically called a contract research organization. That word contract is important. CROs are a third party, sit between drug and device manufacturers and the research that they need to conduct. And so being that third party is very important. And CROs have grown over the years. When they first started in the 90s and such, they were primarily data management and statistical analysis shops and things like that. But over time, sponsors became more and more comfortable with CROs interacting with sites and doctors. Sometimes they were forced to do so. And so CROs have really evolved to become these full service organizations that can run entire trials with you, not for you. It is not a fully handoff process, but I never try to lose sight of the fact that CROs provide a contracted service to their sponsors. And so it comes in different forms. We talked about full service. You can hire a CRO to manage all facets of the trial for you. Even services that CROs don't provide, that you have to go to third-party vendors for. And then you can get into very niche or point solutions, what's generally called FSP, functional service providers, where you hire a CRO to provide you 15 data managers in 3 different countries, over the next 18 months. That's because CROs ultimately exist to provide the solutions that sponsors need from them. And so, they play a critical role. If you spend too much time on LinkedIn, you'll get the impression that CROs' days are numbered, and they're kind of a needless middleman that's going to get knocked out by AI or some other technology, and it's just not true.
In your experience, what are the top qualities that distinguish a great CRO from just an average one?
This is a tough one to answer. I mean, there are definitely some CROs out there that I consider great, CROs. There's a lot of CROs out there. I've seen counts of over 700, and there are CROs out there like IQVIA that are 80,000 people or more. And my consulting work, I've worked with a CRO that had 2 people, a husband and wife team and a network of contractors. So I think they're a great company, but not great in some historic sense. So I think from a great to an average, there's definitely a spectrum in there. I think it comes down to how good are you at customer service and client satisfaction. This is not an industry like in different types of retail and stuff like that, where to be great, you have to develop a product that your customers don't even know they need, right? Mm-hmm. What's the archetype example? The iPhone or something like that. I'm gonna create something that my customers don't even know they need yet. That does not apply to our business, which is heavily regulated, and you've got to play within certain sets of rules. Our job as CROs is to provide the services that our customers need, to always try to innovate, at least on the margins, to work more efficiently, more effectively, more cost effectively, to try to drive down the cost of research over time. But at the end of the day, when you get to the end of the trial, you want your sponsor to feel like you ran the trial on time, on schedule, generally within your budget, that when things came up that were outside of your control or their control, that you treated them fairly about it, that you were good to them on a person-to-person basis, and that as their own development plan continues into the future, that they want to come back to you. So to me, a great CRO is one that continually gets repeat business from delighted customers. And it's a difficult, very difficult industry to provide great customer service, but that to me what separates the great ones from the average ones. The downside, it's also a very difficult industry to measure customer service. There is some net promoter scores and things like that, but the best way to tell is how well are you growing organically, and do you have a lot of repeat business from satisfied customers?
What role does technology play in the modern CRO operations, and what innovations are you most excited about?
Yeah, it's still primarily workflow driving. So workflow and communication between CROs, the customers they serve, the sites that perform the trial locally, and the wide universe of vendors who come into play to help deliver the trial. I think I once said, it might have been about a year ago, I wrote an article called the CRO as the VMO, the vendor management organization, because you start getting into some of these oncology and rare disease trials, which CTI specializes in. You could have 10 to 15 or more vendors now involved in the trial, these third parties that your customers are counting on you to just manage. Again, they can never let you manage it in a totally hands-off fashion, but technology can help all of these different parties communicate through similar systems. But ultimately right now, workflow to communicate with these different parties. You are seeing more and more of these comprehensive type platforms where instead of having a point solution for EDC and another point solution, for drug supply management and another one for CTMS and another one for trial master file, you are getting more and more platforms where all of those products are under one company's umbrella. And some CROs have gone all in on some of those platforms. Doesn't mean they have to. You have some CROs like a company not not far from you here who developed their own 30 years ago and still manage it. So you have a mix of proprietary technologies, reliance on third-party vendors. One way is not better or worse than the other, but you have to have all of these different platforms available to your trial to manage the data, to talk to all the different parties involved, to ensure integrity of the data, and then to be able to analyze it after the end. So that is the role that it plays in modern CRO operations. That's been the case for some time. I'm sure some people are wanting to hear about, AI is an integral part of clinical research. It's not right now. It might be someday, and we'll see what happens on that part. But I would just add to the role technology plays that I've personally seen in my own work a much stronger emphasis on integrations between all of these different platforms. So that way you don't have to choose between using an all-in-one platform or all these different point solutions. If these different point solutions can easily integrate with others, that can make a better experience.
How do CROs balance that speed versus quality, especially in trials like oncology or rare disease?
Yeah. Where it feels fast-paced as it is, you can get into there can be these hurry up and wait in a good way. I mean that in a good way, right? So the ultimate determinant of how quickly a trial can move forward is how quickly you can get sites up and running so that way they can start enrolling patients, even if that enrollment part is going to take a long time in some of these patient populations. So, startup will always feel fast. And so I think the balancing between speed and quality is how well you can select the sites that are involved instead of just picking the ones that will start up the fastest. And I don't know too many CROs that pick sites just because they have a fast startup. They look at the bigger picture. But that is the balance, is if you have a sponsor who's demanding that you get first patient in or X number of patients in by a certain time period, and you feel like you just have to throw sites at the issue. Well, that's balancing speed, quality, and cost. And so I think that will always be something that CROs have to manage with their customers, and that's a good thing. And that's part of what CROs are there for. It's to help sponsors balance, okay, how quickly can we get things up and going while ensuring enrollment, also doing it within a $10 million budget instead of 15 million if I add all of these other sites. And when sponsors are doing it on their own, that can be very difficult to figure out because we'll just hire more people and the cost is more nebulous. It's different when you're working with a CRO and you say, send me two scenarios, and one's 10 million and one's $15 million, but that could really help clarify things.
How does a CRO's culture and leadership impact the success of a clinical trial?
I think it's extremely important. And I think it's something that crosses just about all industries. But you asked me earlier about what can make a great CRO, and it's about how well they satisfy customers. And if you don't have a culture that reinforces to people that they need to respect those around them, but also the people they interact with on the sponsor side, I don't know how you would have consistently good customer service. Otherwise, you're just relying that every single person you hire is a natural born, wonderful customer service representative to the sponsors that you serve. But a positive culture, a positive leadership presence. I feel like people serve customers better when they're part of an organization where they feel like they know what's going on across the company. They're encouraged many times a week, a day, a month, to put customers first, to serve their best interests and to balance those against the needs of the company. To me, that always comes from the top. And if you don't do it, it doesn't mean nobody will do it, but it's really just about the best or only way to ensure that, that it happens consistently.
What are some of the most common misconceptions sponsors have about CROs, and how would you address them?
Yeah, I'd say the number one is, and my background is more on the pricing, bidding, and finance side of the industry, is that CROs always or often underbid the project to win the work. And then they upcharge them later to say, oh yeah, we can get this done with 10 sites, but we secretly think it'll take 15. And let's just put in 10 now and we'll change order them later. And I'm not going to say that never happens, but I mean, I was in-house for about 15 years, often leading these teams that bid these things out, and I almost never saw it. And in the instances where I saw something like it, it was where the sponsor demanded that we are going to go to contract with 10 sites because we heard it happened on this other trial, or this other CRO we didn't select say that that's what's going to happen, and we just, we think that's the way it's going to work. It's very uncommon for CROs to intentionally underbid something to win the work, unless again it's a situation where the sponsor just says we're going to go to trial, or we're going to go to contract on these types of numbers. So I believe that the vast majority of CROs bid things fairly, scope things properly, the overwhelmingly vast majority of the times. I do find that to be a common misconception. To address it, there's really not many ways you can address it except to continue to do the right thing on your end, every single time that you've got an opportunity to bid these things out. So other than going out there in some public forum and saying, hey, we never underbid, there's really no point in that. It's just to continue to do the right thing. I would say another common misconception is that there is like this line in the sand between a big CRO and a small CRO, and that there are certain trade-offs you have to make and work with a big CRO and a small CRO. And so like one of those stereotypes or misconceptions is that big CROs provide bad customer service, small CROs provide great customer service. But there are plenty of sponsors who can be a very small biotech and have a great experience with a top 6 CRO. And believe me, that same company could have a miserable experience with a small CRO who perhaps bid on something in a therapeutic area that they have no experience with, or maybe really stretching their capabilities to perform a trial that they had no business running in the first place. Yeah, but on the flip side, I mean, there's a reason why there is a stereotype that it's tough for a big CRO to provide great service, a great experience to a really small biotech company that's only ever going to run 1 or 2 trials. But I would say it's a common misconception that's just an always true thing, that big CROs provide bad customer service and small ones provide great. It's just a case by case situation.
So what's your take on the trend of decentralization in clinical trials, and how are CROs adapting?
Yeah, it's very gradual, very, very gradual. On the CRO side, it is a process of adopting what is actually real and beneficial and valuable to their customers. Because like I was saying before, it's not an industry where you're out there creating things that your customers don't know that they need. It's almost like you're collaborating with your customers over periods of time to find which of these new technologies, which of these new trial strategies actually work. Even in 2020, 2021, 2022, when a lot of things started to go more decentralized, virtual, remote, etc. Yeah, you had a spike in adoption right there, but it's really leveled out since then. I think, signs that I would look for to see CROs making some wholesale entrance into this is, are they buying companies that specialize in decentralized hybrid trials? They're not. And even the ones they haven't renewed those investments. PPD used to be a huge investor in Science 37. Not so much anymore. Syneos made a couple acquisitions during that time period as well. They haven't worked out great. Doesn't mean that DCT, hybrid trials, etc. Doesn't mean there's nothing there. It just means that it's a gradually evolving way of working, within the clinical trial framework that has been in place for many years. But where it has been valuable is that anytime it allows more people to participate in research in more convenient ways, that's a great thing. There is just a cost trade-off. And cost trade-offs have always been a part of clinical research back to the beginning of clinical research time, and they always will be, because it's research. It's not as much care as it is research. And so in any kind of research, you have to trade off the cost of doing something with its future expected benefits. So long way of saying that I think that overwhelming mass adoption of some of these decentralized and virtual trial techniques or methodologies will be constrained by the cost trade-off. And that cost trade-off can be absolutely enormous in a trial where a nurse has to go out to someone's home for all of the subject visits versus those people coming into a central location.
So how important is therapeutic area expertise when selecting a CRO, and how can sponsors evaluate that effectively?
Yeah, I personally think it's more important than ever. And I think that is something where a smaller to mid-size CRO can absolutely shine against a larger one, even if that larger CRO on paper can say that they've run 3 times as many studies as the smaller company has in that therapeutic area, it's the proportion of studies that company has run that can be really important. So there's a lot of therapeutically niched CROs where almost the entire company is based around that particular therapeutic area. And so they'll have site relationships, they'll have in-house expertise, whether it's clinical expertise, medical expertise, et cetera, that is all focused around that research area, the sites that are best suited to do that, having the best relationships with those sites. And there can even be certain technologies that are better suited, and not just technologies as in terms of general products, but specific technology vendors whose products are better for certain therapeutic areas than others. And I feel like the smaller to mid-size therapeutically focused CROs can have much better insight into those, and as opposed to a much larger CRO where you have to be a little bit broader and maybe even more therapeutic area agnostic, around those vendor and technology selections. So that's been a differentiator for many years, and I think it will continue to be so. I actually don't think that's too affected by technology. That's just about, you're a biotech, you're focused on a specific therapeutic area. And it's nice to talk to another company where they are also completely focused on that therapeutic area.
So one more question for you. We're going to look ahead. What do you think the future holds for CROs in terms of innovation, partnerships, and the impact on drug development?
Yeah, it's tough to say. There's definitely a technology element of it, and I'll bring up the AI angle of this. I'm definitely seeing signs that, I believe it's called agentic AI, which is the idea that these AI agents are working behind the scenes to catch things going on in your data, your systems, et cetera, that are just not obvious to the human user. And so to use an example from Veeva's last quarter report, they expect to have one of their first agents on the TMF side coming out either later this year or early next year. And so it means, I don't want to speak too much for them, so we'll broaden this back out to the idea in general. It's that you as a TMF professional, you wake up, you go to work, you turn on your computer, and you receive a series of notifications of things that may be wrong in your TMF based on the agent working behind the scenes to find those potential issues. That's more of a lag effect. But as you're filing the document, as you're doing other things with the document, it's always there, checking your work, checking things that, again, may not be obvious with you, especially in other systems that you're not familiar with. Again, not to do your job for you, but to dramatically help assist the efficiency of the work you do, and the quality of the documents that all clinical trials produce. So I do think there's a lot of innovation potential there. What I would hope to see out of that is it helps to make more CRO operations so efficient that it helps drive down the total cost of clinical research. That's what I look for in any technological revolution of, okay, does it make things more convenient? Okay, that's nice. Does it make things look nicer? Okay, that's nice. But does it actually drive down the cost of the way you work for both yourself and your customers? Anything that can dramatically do that, to me, like that's some real innovation there. It just hasn't proven itself out yet. But you said looking ahead, and that's definitely one thing I look for. And partnerships, I've not really seen anything there on the innovation side. I think it is still a matter of best understanding what your customers need from you, and having the best capabilities that you can possibly have to address those, and knowing how to work with them on a personalized individual level, again, to make them feel like they had a great experience working with you. And partnerships, that's more common on the large pharma side. Almost all of them went through processes over the past 2 years to renew their partnerships with their different CRO partners, and there were not a lot of dramatic changes coming out of all of that, which tells me that, believe it or not, CROs have been, are, and will continue to be good partners, generally speaking, for most sponsors, and we all want to do better. Our customers want us to do better, but we are doing a good job, and we have to keep continuing to try to do best jobs and better jobs. Now, impact on drug development, that's a bit out of my wheelhouse, and especially on the much, much earlier phase side. But anytime the industry can get better at drug development, that helps everything. It helps funding, because investors naturally pour money into better drug development ideas than feeling like they have to take more of a shotgun approach. And I think some people think that if we get really, really good at drug development, biotech funding might go down because there'll be fewer candidates to look for. I think that if we get better at drug development in the early stages, that's actually going to give investors more comfort to pour more money into the industry.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you too.
That was Joel White, founder of Market Cap Consulting. You can find Joel's quarterly recaps or get connected with him on his LinkedIn profile. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. Visit ctifacts.com to learn more about how we can help with your clinical trials. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep moving medicine forward.